And I'll begin by noting that I think this is a very different kind of county election than any we have faced in our memory. And it's because for most of Westchester's modern history, Democrats and Republicans have pretty much served in a moderate mainstream tradition. It's not to say we haven't had big fights at election time, not to say we haven't had big disagreements, but there's been a common sense that you measure government by its practical effects on lives and on communities. And when campaigns are over, you work hard in order to find areas of cooperation and collaboration so that you can do things together. And so the philosophical differences between the two sides on the basic level of values has usually not been all that wide. That is not the case for this year's election. Now, I begin with the proposition, and this has been true throughout my public life, true even when I was a kid growing up. I begin with the proposition that our lives are interlinked, that we're in it together, that we have responsibilities to each other as people who share a community, and that one of the purposes of government is to give people the tools that enable them to stand on their own 2 feet and achieve their potential and contribute to the common good. But that's the moral test of whether we're doing our jobs properly when we're involved in public service. And from that proposition springs all sorts of specific choices that relate to human services, that relate to economic development, that relate to job creation, that relate to the whole tone and spirit of how you allocate resources, how you establish partnerships, how you demonstrate respect for different communities. And I think that the orientation and the values and the philosophy of the current administration at the county level is entirely different. The view there is the less we do together, the better. The more people are left to fend for themselves, the better off they will be, as though somehow that equates to freedom. You know, get what you can, however you can, until the devil go behind us. And just like I said in terms of my own views, from that proposition, again, springs a whole series of decisions. I don't know how else you could explain devastating cuts in child care, devastating cuts in eviction prevention, the withdrawal of services from communities that most need them, the shedding of critical positions in the county government that deliver services that people most need, the resistance to common sense gun safety standards that can protect our communities from violence, the failure to have an economic development strategy that can really attract investment and job opportunities to our cities. These are not policies in my mind that you can explain through any kind of rational cost-benefit analysis. You can't justify them on the basis of how they affect actual lives. All you can do is say it springs, like I said, from that notion. We just should not be doing things together. And the smaller our government, the less we engage in public action, somehow we're all going to be better off. And so my point is that this is a big election. And sometimes people are not so engaged in county government. You know, it's not as sexy as the national government. It's not as immediate as the local government. It's not in the news as much as the state government. But you better believe that hundreds of thousands of people are going to be affected by the choice that gets made on November 5th. Hundreds of thousands of people. And whether you end up agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, whether you end up voting for me or voting for the other guy, shame on all of us if we don't take the time to educate ourselves about the stakes and then to let our neighbors and colleagues and friends also understand how much is at stake, so that we can all be sure that our views and our values are fully expressed in the choice that's made on election day this year. So, like I said,